All right.
Lulu, you got to get out of the way. Let's go. Like, pardon me.
No. No. No.
Hush. We
Right.
did multiple things that were entrepreneurial ventures, like selling different things. We tried to get into real estate. We bought a house, turned it into a rental house,
Yes.
things like that. But our first official business venture by way of forming an entity would have been Kirk and Angie's Cash Smart Kids.
Try writing that on checks and
Every time you got to make a deposit or sign a legal document, Kirk and Angie's Cash
Kirk
Smart
and
Kids.
Angie's Cash Smart Kids.
Inc.
INC.
Yes,
Yep.
INC. Yep. So this is my favorite part of the story.
Yes.
It started with a book written by Robert Kiyosaki, and you probably have heard of it. You could fill in the blanks. It's Rich Dad,
Poor Dad.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Was given to me by my boss and my friend and my boss at the time, Kenny Walt. He laid it on my desk one day and he said, "You should read this." I started reading it and I think I read it within 48 hours. I just consumed it. I couldn't. Wow. It blew me away, and it convinced me that even though I was working in a corporate job, that we needed to do something entrepreneurial. We needed to start our own company. And as we would learn years later, Michael Gerber, in his book, The E-Myth, calls that having an entrepreneurial seizure. But going back to Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that book is amazing. I highly recommend it. And we'll talk about that as one of the books that made an impact in our life. Idea. But he had this board game called Cash Flow 101. And that's another thing that we'll be talking about down the road, because I think it's a very valuable tool.
Yeah.
But we thought, wow, kids need to learn this. Mm-hmm. And then we found out they had a board game for kids called Cash Flow.
This is before we had kids, too. We didn't have any kids.
Right. Cash Flow for Kids. So we thought, okay, what if we formed a company and we will sell this board game to kids? And
families with kids.
I just remembered, I don't know if they were, somehow we had built a relationship with Robert Spot, who owned the Kids Directory. I just remembered.
Oh my gosh, I remember that.
And you were a teacher and an educator, and we were thinking, oh my gosh, we can take something that'll benefit kids, and it relates to finances. Yes. And I was working in the financial services industry at that time. And this is a way that we can do something together
for children,
for kids,
and families,
and leverage a community resource.
We were starting to talk about starting a family. We'd been married for 5 years. Yeah.
And we could leverage that resource of the Kids Directory. Mm-hmm. And I remember, it was not cheap, by the way. It was a very expensive publication. But I remember
the game wasn't cheap either.
We bought an ad in the Kids Directory. Wow. And I want to say that we sold a total of 1, maybe 2 board games of Cash Flow for Kids. But that was our first official business that was a corporation. And that's how it started. And that's why it was called what it was called. And if you're still out there, I hope you're doing well. But I have not thought about you in a long time. Robert Spot from the Kids Directory.
Wow. That's a blast from the past.
That is.
And then under Cash Smart Kids, Kirk and Angie's Cash Smart Kids, we also did a couple of small things. We had a friend that introduced us to a supplement company called Advocare, and thought, okay, we'll start selling these supplements. And the first month we signed up, we did a party out of our house to introduce other people, because it was
I forgot about that.
And after that, I started venturing into jewelry with a friend of mine, and that also came under Kirk and Angie's Cash Smart Kids. I was able to get.
We started a DBA. So if you're not an entrepreneur or a business person, a DBA is basically like
doing business as.
It's like a legal business card that just says you can do business as, but you're really just doing business as yourself. You don't have the legal protections that you do with a corporation or an LLC. But we did design Kirk and Angie's Cash Smart Kids, DBA, doing business as.
And it was also DBA because it was designed by Angie.
DBA, designed by Angie. And you
Yes.
started teaching kids how to make jewelry,
Yes.
doing jewelry parties.
And that's actually where we did better. I did better at that.
We might have even
making jewelry and selling the jewelry.
Right.
And it was interesting because I see a pattern, and we saw a pattern through that there was something that had to do with teaching and passing down to kids.
And creating an experience. Yes, but yes.
And so I did a lot better doing the parties than I did actually selling the pieces of jewelry.
So the part of the story you forgot was when we changed the name from Kirk and Angie's Cash Smart Kids to Houston Shield and Seal to sell concrete sealers and surface prep technologies. And then we started doing Green Go Technologies underneath that to get in on the green building products movement. And from there...
So the last business that we had under that corporation was Green Go's, HSSI. Then it became Green Go's, and then after that we shut it down.
But we were doing things from a solo entrepreneur standpoint, not as a business. We didn't have business training. We had experience with large organizations. I worked at several publicly traded companies, but we were turned off by all the big stuff. We wanted to do small business. We just didn't realize how much we didn't know and how much we could know and how to tap into those resources. So that's what's different about where we are today and all that stuff.
I also sold different products under the DBA, and one of them was Tantal, candles. I felt like a peddler. I go from store to store trying to sell products. And that was actually really good because that taught me how to talk to people, and I had to find the business owners to see who would be willing to buy the products. So that was cool learning. That was my first experience outside of working retail, because I did work retail at one point, but that was my experience of going to business owners and learning how to show them something that would benefit their business and help them.
Okay, so even though each of these ventures were not financially successful, we were finding, without knowing it, realizing it, we were picking up treasure along the way.
Right.
And when you said that about Tantal, that reminded me of when I decided I wanted to move from being in a customer service world into a sales world. And I was having dinner at a restaurant one night with a friend, and I heard these people talking sales. I could tell they were salesmen. And after I got done eating, even though I was wearing t-shirts and blue jeans with holes in the knees, like a surfer skater motif, I just made a choice. I'm going to go introduce myself. And I made a declaration. Hey, I just want to meet you. Sounds like you guys are in sales, and that's what I want to do one day. But it's those little things along the way seem tiny.
Yeah.
Like selling Tantals. Like every once in a while we'll drive by.
Split personality purses.
Yes. And we so many memories on all that. But whenever we drive by those boutiques, like over in the Heights or in the Village or wherever, it brings back memories of that journey. But the journey was not about how much money did we make at the time or whether we were successful. Believe me, I'm jealous of people that have started businesses and been very successful. I want to do that. We're doing that now, but
each of those experiences
was not a waste.
A character, in us that was, instead of, we pushed harder to try to make more sales, but the good that comes out of that is the endurance and what gets built eternally inside of you. I didn't see success, but I remember going in and I remember what worked and what didn't work with those business owners. I remember going in and being, super sweet and not just trying to push what I had. I wanted to get to know each business owner. And I remember, using the product myself too, the Tantal, and and having samples to give them that they could use for free. The actual business owners would also be like, I want to use, because at the time that the self-tanning was really popular back then. It still is, but like back then it was really popular. But you would always turn you orange. And so they would say, okay, does this turn me orange? I'd say, no, look, I have it on my skin too. And I really had used it, and I had to do trial and error, not to get it on my hands because it would look like a wet one. And it was crazy technology. And it was on this little wet one towel. But you did have to be sure not to get it on your hands because it would turn your palms orange, just like the lotion did. But it had some kind of technology in it that you would put it on and it did not smell like those lotions. So that was actually really cool. Oh, and they had the deodorant one too. So remember they had this one that was like a deodorant that you'd put on under your arms. I don't
to
think
tan your armpits?
No, it was a deodorant.
Oh.
It was not tanning.
Well, they also had the salt scrub.
Yeah, and then
that was even more popular, I think.
Yeah, we had a salt scrub thing that was a different company that I sold, and then I'd sell these reversible purses that had feathers all around them, and that was called Split Personality because the whole idea behind it was that you had two different kinds of purses in one bag.
Okay, did we meet Split Personality when we went to the Dallas show? I remember we went to the trade show in Dallas. I think it was for Towel.
Yeah, or no, it was for something else.
Maybe it was the salt scrub.
No, it was okay because we had the tax ID number. We went to this Dallas show because that was for jewelry. I got my jewelry.
That's for yes,
and that's where I was able to get the beads for dirt cheap, like really, really cheap, and got really cool things to use in my.
But it was at that trade show that we started meeting other vendors of products that we could sell.
So we did meet her there. And come to find out, she lived in Houston, which was really cool because she said, "Well, I need a."
That's where we met.
I need somebody to. I need a salesperson.
So Cash Smart Kids,
yes,
led to Designed by Angie,
yes,
jewelry, which led to Split Personality, which led to Tan Towel,
yes,
and the salt scrub. And then, do you remember the other thing that we found?
The candles. A lady.
Do you remember
up
the
in
name?
Spring.
I remember the name.
Oh, it was French. It was like a French
Soy Sisters.
Oh no. Okay, so then there was this late. Okay, so then there were candles that we added to that bunch, that also led to the lady that was in Spring that had a little shop, and then she had me selling her stuff as well. So she made soaps and other kinds of candles,
and they were all things that could be sold in boutiques.
Yes, boutiques, but each one built upon each other. And I think the biggest lesson we learned from all of that was also relationship and community. And because we built relationships with these people that we would talk to, and we continued to talk to them for a few years, even after we did the selling.
Right.
I think the Soy Sisters guy was in Austin and he ended up selling his company.
Right.
And
we met him at a one of those, like at the Bel Air
craft show.
Yeah.
Oh, we would have so we'd set up a booth and we would sell our stuff within the booth. So we'd pay for the booth and then
farmers market type craft show type things.
I remember that.
And what's funny is I don't have any specific memories from any craft show except for one very strange memory that happened at the Bel Air craft show.
With the dog that we had?
Yeah.
Oh, I knew it.
Some guy walked up and offered us $1,000 for our dog. And we're like, no way.
So again, this is going back to before we had kids, and their dog was like our kid. Her name was Mingo. And so she was a very well-behaved dog because we didn't have any kids. And we treated her like our child. And she was very, very well disciplined enough to where she could just sit without a leash. She'd sit in a chair. And
like a human, she'd sit up.
And people would come by and she'd be like, hello, and not run off. Even if she saw, at that time, even when she'd see other dogs, she would not run off unless we'd said, okay, you can go. And I think because she was so well behaved, he's like, I want her.
And when we said no to the 1,000, he upped. Do you remember what he upped it up to?
No.
He said, I'll give you $1,050. And we're like, no.
Really?
I remember that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So,
but those shows also, again, were so awesome because we loved, remember what we liked the most about it?
Meeting people,
talking to people. They'd come by and stand at our booth and talk forever. And they probably didn't buy anything, but we would find out information from them that was probably worth more than them buying something from us and giving money.
I'll just go ahead and say it that treasure hunting is something that's a big deal, and we'll be talking about that. And there will be treasure hunts in the future involving books.
Sounds good.
Hint, hint.
Anything else you want to say?
Only that I didn't want to do this because it's not fun remembering all these painful memories, because while we learned a lot, there was a lot of frustrating stuff along the way, and I'm glad that we can just talk about the good stuff now.
I think what's so cool is that every story continues to build on each other. And even when you're remembering some of the details, because this is totally not scripted at all, and pulling from those memories is hard because there's a lot that's happened in between. But it builds upon each other in a way that we're continuously learning, and it's a good example of showing how learning never stops. And then also connections never stop either, and sometimes you don't know the connection until after the story's happened, and
Right.
you're on to another story, and then you're like, oh my gosh, that because I met that person, that's how I met that person. And all along, God's always had me on this journey with this. And for us, one of those things that I see the connection continuously is relationship and building of children and families,
Mm-hmm.
and bringing it back to the fact that we've been on a
Okay.
journey together.
So, one other interesting thing, ever since we were in high school, we have been involved almost every year in some form of youth ministry, youth
Yep.
work. We were with Generation Jesus, Young Life, um, volunteers at different churches, interviewed to be youth pastors at a couple of different churches. So glad that didn't work out. But my point is that we've had a passion for, and I don't know what the word is, but we've always enjoyed working with youth.
That's a thread.
And if you can share things in a way that makes sense to a young person, more than likely you can communicate that in a way that makes sense to people of any age group.
What's interesting too is that in the past, kids were always expected to be in their place, like school, or not with the adults. And I think more and more you're starting to see young people in business settings more and more. Kids have their own business. Conferences that used to only be adults in these conferences, we're starting to see kids.
Yeah.
Parents are bringing their children because they want them to learn the information they know is valuable, that they could start at a younger age. What was something that our parents always said to us? I wish I would have known that at your age.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we're doing it. Okay.
Well, and I
I'm
think
bringing them
society
in.
had this stupid idea that kids were meant to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
And I have no problem saying the word stupid because that's just stupid. But that's how families and organizations operated. Kids were segregated and isolated by age and sometimes by gender, and by just compartmentalize kids and keep them out of the way. And
even if you don't have kids or you don't have a family, everyone can be a part of a kid's life by giving them the tools that they need to succeed.
And those are the most
in
important formative years. And we have been so blessed because of all the people that poured into our lives when we were young people.
Yes.
And so, but the reason why I think that that's also important to share that is that also played a role in what is a big part of our lives today, which is cadre.
And it's cool because there's so many more threads that are continuing even now that we're learning on to help us with what we're doing now.